HMS Blackpool is Great Britain's new top coastal ship in Update 2.5 X-Way Strike. Blackpool is a Tier 5 battle rating 3.7 frigate that costs as much as a battleship. It's a Whitby-class anti-submarine frigate, of which 8 were built. They were first commissioned in 1956, being primarily designed for defending convoys by hunting down submarines and deterring aircraft. HMS Blackpool itself was commissioned in 1958, leased to the Royal New Zealand Navy from 1966 to 1971, and eventually scrapped in 1978. Over its lifetime, the Whitby-class served the British, Indian, and New Zealand navies, with the last ship of the class, INS Treacle, being decommissioned in 1992. The primary armament of Blackpool consists of two 114mm 4.5-inch 45 caliber cannons and a single turret towards the front of the ship. These have a peak fire rate of 20 rounds per minute per gun, with about the accuracy one would expect from a 20 RPM cannon. Pretty poor, but generally offset by the fire rate. The overall damage output is quite weak currently, as the last major patch severely nerfed the damage output of the 114mm cannon. The turret also has an extremely poor arc of fire. Due to how the front of the ship is raised, there's a 90-degree arc towards the front of the ship where the guns can't fire at anything under 3 kilometers. The turret is also close enough to the bridge that there's a 100-degree arc behind the ship where the gun can't fire. This means there's only an 85-degree opening to fire at on either side of the ship when the range is below 3 kilometers, which at this ship's battle rating is quite common. This is a bit of an inconvenience, but also very importantly keeps it from bow tanking, which is a major hit to the ship's survivability. The 114mm gun gets HE, SAP, HETF, and HEVT. Normally, I would suggest HEVT as the primary shell, except in this case, since every other shell type than HE costs 50 SL a shot, you can burn 30,000 SL of ammunition in a single life doing that. Due to that, I would recommend taking an ammo load of almost entirely stock HE and a few shells of HEVT for dealing with aircraft. Speaking of dealing with aircraft, the only other cannon that Whitby has is a dual 40mm Bofors turret sat on the back of the ship. This is a pretty standard 40mm. Pretty good against aircraft, and it can deal with smaller surface targets, though the limited arc of the turret leaves the ship vulnerable to frontal attacks from the air. For ammunition, it's a similar case to the main guns. With a cost of 9 SL per 4 shells, the Bofors turret burns around 720 SL a minute with anything but the universal belt for little to no benefit. The last weapons on Blackpool are 12 Mark 20 bitter torpedoes and 6 Limbo anti-submarine mortars. The Mark 20 bitters are excessively slow, have very small explosive warheads, and have an alright range. There's no real reason to bring these. They're hard to get hits with, deal very little damage when they do hit, and lower the survivability of the ship by being very easy to detonate one shot. These torpedoes were actually so bad that they weren't even accepted for service on the Whitbys in real life, by the way. The Limbo mortar is just like any other depth charge mortar, useless in War Thunder, though it is pretty funny how the depth charges just kinda knew them off into the distance. In survivability, Blackpool is pretty bad. 231 crew, 7 hull sections, and no hull armor. It's a large target and not survivable enough to take the beating it'll receive, along with only having a single main turret with thin armor, meaning it's very easy to disable the ship. For Blackpool's mobility, it has a top speed of 56 km per hour, which is below average compared to the destroyers it has to face constantly. There's no real playstyle for Blackpool. Overall, the ship has poor firepower and is a slow, sluggish target with no redeeming qualities in War Thunder. Even the legendarily bad Town L-45 is debatably better than it currently. At best, try to get into the coastal section of a map and maintain some distance with PT boats to take them out from outside the range of their lower caliber weaponry, but even in this situation, something like a flak barge or other frigates will still tear HMS Blackpool apart. Blackpool also costs 320,000 RP, which is equal to some battleships like Poltava and Westfalen, giving it one of the highest RP costs in all of naval forces for a ship that gets dunked on by some reserves in the Bluewater tree. It simply isn't worth picking up or using in any way, for any purpose, or for any reason. For mods, I would recommend not unlocking any, and for crew skills, nothing will save it. Thank you for watching.